All right. Well, we're 1 minute after. I'm basing my time on that clock on the wall. So if your watch says different, I'm sorry, but there's my timekeeper right there. And if I don't get going, I know I'll be way behind, which I usually am anyway. But we got a lot to cover. So first off, just wanted to talk a little bit about this event. I think most of you probably know why we're here. In this world today, where we have great divisions over the things that are our most deeply held beliefs, whether it's religion or politics. And generally, when two groups come together that don't see things quite the same way, that generally results in hostility. And so what we want to do tonight is talk about how to get past that. How do we have good, positive, meaningful conversation in a culture that really seems bent on dividing into camps, right? So I figure you want to know just a brief little bit about me. There really isn't a whole lot to say about me. I was born and raised right here, and I've lived here my whole life. Other than a couple of years right out of college, I lived in Fort Smith. Now this is going to be bad when he graduated, but I graduated from Morrilton in 1989. And then I graduated from Arkansas Tech in 98 with a Bachelor of Science and Computer Science degree. And I'm currently set to graduate from Southwestern Baptist Seminary this coming fall with a master's degree in theology. I've been married since 2001 to the lovely lady right back there, Miss Wendy. And we have one child, an 8-year-old daughter. About my Christian background, I became a Christian around 1996. And I say around because I remember the moment, but I am the worst person at remembering dates. So I think it was around 96, but I've really been more active in teaching and ministry in the last 4 years or so. So outside of church, well, here at church, I teach a Sunday school class, and Wendy and we lead the children's church. But outside of church, a lot of my ministry is really focused on engaging people in the public square, public events, college campuses, universities, and just reaching out to people from different faiths and backgrounds and discussing, trying to learn what they believe, what it is that they hold the truth, and really discuss matters of truth. Now, my dialogue partner tonight is Alan Medders, and a lot of you know him, and because he's local too. He's from Center Ridge and went to Nino Vista. Graduated with honors in 2007. Joined the Marine Corps that same year, and now this is really awesome. So cool. Worked as an aviation electronic technician on Huey and Cobra helicopters. So we may have a long talk about that later. But he was deployed to Afghanistan between 2009 and 10 and actually finished his service in 2012. Now, I know we've got a lot of service people here today, including Alan, some active, some out, but let me just say thank you for your service. Can we give them a round of applause? Alan was raised in church, baptized around 2004, right? But some years after military service ended, he left his Christianity and embraced atheism, and really struggled for a while to have civil conversation, like we were talking about, from people with various backgrounds. But since then, worked on his communication skills, getting better through conversation with various people groups, and from people with all walks of life. And last year, he founded the Atheist Community of Conway, and every month they're down there distributing food, clothes, and toiletries to the homeless. So kudos to that. So that's a little bit about both of us and where we come from. And so let's jump right into the dialogue, because I know we got a lot of ground to cover. And this picks up. Yeah, great. So let me just start off and say this. I want to get to probably the most heated issue that we're going to talk about tonight. And I know a lot of people in here will understand this, but I know many of us wonder, why is it that your Facebook wall seems to be filled up with posts related to lawnmowers? Because I get the impression that somehow there was a theft in your background, you just can't get past it or something.
I didn't think this would be brought up here, but it got stolen in 2014. I bought it with the last money I had from Afghanistan, actually. got stolen, and they broke into my little shed, my weed eater, and then they took the gas cans on top of that. So it's been a little sour moment, but a joke.
And now I'm starting to get it seems like maybe your friends just won't let the issue die. Maybe
I'm thinking one of them are the culprits.
All right. That fits into having positive dialogue in this, So, all right. Well, let's talk, I guess, a little bit about just the culture, right? I mean, because that's the kind of the purpose of this event. I mean, because obviously, there's certain words that you and I both, you drop in public, like atheist or Christian or Republican or Democrat, and right away, you've got verbal bombs coming at you, and a lot of times going the other way. So, it's easy, I think, for us to tear other beliefs down, but that doesn't really get us anywhere, right? So,
No.
Do you see the culture as really just being as hostile like that in those areas?
Yes, I see. If someone has a deeply held belief, immediately, if there's key words like atheist, those defense walls immediately go up and the claws come out, like immediately. Sometimes, not all the time. But it's the same way. If you knock on an atheist door, and you're wearing a little Mormon tag or something, and it's usually not going to end very well. It's just not.
Exactly. And this is going to kind of, I guess, sort of, like I say, you when you say something words, it almost seems like, do you see people have an immediate impression about who you are, what you believe, and everything else just based on one defining characteristic?
Yes, when I started telling people I was an atheist, they immediately began to say, "You believe we came from monkeys?" I'm like, "Well, no, but so that's not what an atheist is." But thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean that sort of statement right there. Let's talk about. I'm call these type of negative statements conversation killers, right? Because maybe you're engaging with someone, you've got a conversation going, and it's pretty cordial, and then for whatever reason, maybe the person gets flustered or something, and they throw something out that seems to like, well, you've lost me. You just totally, I don't know that I can go forward with this. So, from your perspective, from an atheist perspective, what sort of things do you see maybe Christians come at with, like, well,
As a conversation
that
stopper,
conversation ender?
an immediate conversation ender is, anything that's going to insult the person you're talking to, or anything that's going to threaten them. It's an immediate conversation killer. I mean, it wouldn't be very fair if I came up to people and started telling them that they were going to be, go to hell or something, just basic, something like that. Or, you're going to burn, No one really wants to hear that, and that's not the way it should be approached if you want to have a good dialogue.
Yeah, you and I, we talked about this a little bit a while back around the Texas church shooting. It wasn't a day after that, and I said, you watch what's going to happen from this, that the Activist Mommy is apparently a pretty popular blog that came out, and she tweeted, the Texas mass shooter was an atheist whose friend said he was vocal and weird atheist who followed the Friendly Atheist Facebook page. No surprise. Implying, I suppose, that because of this, she has this idea like, well, that's just the natural result. Now, to me, from your perspective, that would be, okay, I don't know that I can have a conversation.
Well, it's absurd because you're insinuating that, not believing in a deity is, something mentally ill. Someone's mentally ill just because, they don't believe what you believe.
All right, so let me turn this around a little bit, because obviously now, from your side, and you've called. I've got a person in mind, and I know you. I think I understand your opinion, but someone like, say, a Richard Dawkins, you call him the firebrand atheist. I've actually looked, and I think they sort of maybe embrace something called the New Atheist Movement.
Yeah.
And you take something like what Dawkins said at the Reason Rally. If you encounter a religious person, mock them. ridiculed them, in public, basically, was his rallying cry. So, to me, that right there, I mean, that sort of mentality from a Christian, I mean, if your immediate thing is, because I embrace Christianity, nothing that I say can have any meaning, any value. It's total illogic coming from me. I don't know that we can even have a conversation. But what is your position on? What do you think about things like that?
I think that's unproductive. Because it's basically the same thing as knocking on someone's door and telling them you're going to burn. It shouldn't be said like that. Especially if you're trying to have a dialogue. If you're not going to have a dialogue, then it probably still shouldn't be said. But it's.
Yeah, let me just say I totally agree. I mean, obviously, and I want to kind of touch on this later, and maybe this is the right time. Well, I'll say it a little later, but when I see Christians engage with, and I've seen this with you personally. I've watched your conversations, and when you begin to say, okay, well, what evidence do you bring to the table? What would move you on the evidence scale? What is it? When they start having to really examine, what do I believe and why do I believe it? A lot of times, instead of just saying, well, I don't know, they tend to get flustered and say, well, you're going to find out one of these days when you're burning in hell. And let me just say, I think that is ridiculous. Now, do we believe people that die apart from the grace of Christ, are they going to be separated? And is that where yes, but I mean, as well as I do, I don't lead with that. I don't use it as a weapon. If somebody asks, I don't know that I've ever even brought it up in a conversation. But I don't. There's no value in that sort of.
No, it's not productive at all. When I speak with people, the main thing I want to know is what they believe and why they believe it. I don't care if they believe or what they believe as long as it's not harmful. But it's something, you have to know why you believe. If you don't, then the belief is worthless. I don't know.
And I forgot to say this during the announcement. If you look in front of you in the pew backs and where the books are, you see some pens and some index cards. If a question comes up in your mind during this, if you want to see a topic Alan and I are going to talk about, jot it down. In about 15 minutes or so, we're going to go around and collect those. But if you want an atheist to answer a question or a Christian to answer a question, put it down, and we're going to get through those at the end of this as best we can. But anyway, so, this idea about, this sort of goes to another topic I was thinking about, which is really around negative statements. Should a defining characteristic of a belief or a viewpoint ever be seen as offensive? Now, let me give a little bit of context to this, right? If a Muslim was to come up to me and say, look, if you don't believe in the oneness of all, if you believe in the Trinity, you have committed the unpardonable sin and you are damned for all eternity. That's not offensive to me because I know that's what he believes. So should something like, not that I would ever lead with it, but the idea of a just God that sends people to hell, from the Christian worldview, should that ever be seen as offensive? Because, on more than one place, I've seen where some atheists really find that idea to be just completely insulting to them, and really that ends the conversation for them before you even get started.
I, for one, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. I don't really get emotional when it comes to my posts or conversations like that. But I can only speak for me. There's other atheists, the stereotypical angry atheist out there. If you want to trigger them, to say those key words or key phrases, or talk to them about damning them to hell, like a Muslim would, or anything like that.
Well, and even I would say from your perspective, I have seen atheists say something like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe there's any evidence for God. And your belief, the Bible, it's all a myth. And I've seen Christians get really offended by that. And I just question, like, well, what do you think it means to be an atheist? What do you think this person would say, or hold, and so, I mean, have you seen people get offended over that sort of thing? So,
yeah, it's strange how some people, when you're interacting with someone else, both walls may be up for both persons, and having that meaningful dialogue, you might want to, take baby steps, into that.
Right.
Because if not, you're going to just kill the conversation, without, as long as you don't have like a hidden agenda, your agenda shouldn't be to convert someone. It should be to, progress in what you believe, or, figure out why this person is an atheist, or, just figure out, get to know someone.
It seems to me like, a lot of the things that this was revolving around, I know you've experienced it, and like I said, I've experienced it, and kind of hinted at it here, but really, it's straw manning, and if you don't know what straw manning is, it's, if you say I'm an atheist or I'm a Christian or whatever, immediately you've got somebody that's already formed a complete opinion of everything that you believe, rather than really engaging and say, okay, well, what is it? Because just for the sake of the folks listening here, in terms of atheists, is it sort of this monolithic belief in terms of the world and nature and all these things?
Atheists are not immune to belief. I know atheists that, are pro-life, pro-choice. I know Republican atheists. I know atheists that love, healing crystals, which seems odd, but, who would believe in crystals, right? But, there's atheists of every color and every belief. I mean, the only thing is, atheists just don't believe in a God. They don't have a deity to believe in. So there's still, the old wives' tale, me and you probably went back and forth on this a lot, where you put the onion in the sock, or onion on the nightstand, or the potato in the sock, whichever one it is.
I don't want to get into home medical. That might cause a riot.
Yeah, it might.
All right, well, the point I say that is, obviously, one of the things that I see, and I know, you are very careful about that, and I know many atheists are very careful about that. No. Don't import anything about where the world came from or how we got here. Atheism only means I don't believe in a deity.
Yep.
And that's all it means, because, like you say, there's so much more beyond that you see really people all over the board on, right? But given how you are sort of mischaracterized a lot of times, what sort of ways are you mischaracterized that really, I don't know if it kills conversation, but it certainly derails it long enough as you really trying to explain, like, no, here's what I believe in this. What are the common mischaracterizations that you encounter?
A lot of the ones are, let me kind of think here. I don't know.
Well,
I don't want to get the wrong thing.
I understand. For at least from my perspective, it's pretty limited, I would say. Belief in Satan. If you don't believe in God, why would you believe in Satan? That's one thing. You didn't kill any babies today?
I didn't eat any babies.
Okay.
A lot of people think we eat babies, or we're immoral people. That's a good one. It's not a good one. It's a horrible one, actually.
Yeah. And like I said, from my perspective, generally it's not so broad ranging, but more along the lines of, I guess, what Dawkins would hold to. Like, well, if I believe in creationism, I'm illogical, narrow-minded dimwit that's incapable of critical thinking. And so, when you see that sort of mischaracterization, for me, probably the bulk of my conversations with people of different faiths or non-faith is about really tearing down all the misconceptions that they have about me, so we can actually get to the point where meaningful dialogue can begin. I mean, is that what you experience a lot of times?
Yeah, at least on your side, I'll tell a short story here. Having a conversation with a Christian, and he said another Christian wasn't a Christian. And I was like, well, how do you know that? Like, how do you know what he believes in? It's like, does your belief in God, or your belief that his belief is not, it's just complicated. You don't know. It's like you're stereotyping your own people. It's like I see it all the time.
Sure. All right. Let me we're getting close to the middle point here. So let me shift gears and go one more direction before we collect the Q&A cards, because it's really relevant, I think, to this, because I see what I perceive to be really a shrinking attention span in the world today. And let me give you an example. When I look back in studying church history, around the Middle Ages, when this would have mainly been two thoughts of religion coming together, but for them to work out their differences generally meant they would have a debate that would last a week, and they would go every day and debate for 8 hours for a solid week, and generally get drunk and fight in the street after that. But even in my own lifetime, and when I think about my parents, they would watch news in the morning, probably news at noon, and then an hour and a half of news at night, and probably read the newspaper cover to cover. But here today, obviously Facebook is cropped up as one of the major places for the younger generation to find info. And within Facebook, you can type in 2 or 3 paragraphs. But quite often, if you go that long, I see the old TLDR pop up. Too long, didn't read.
Yep.
For 3 paragraphs. And so I think that's probably why Twitter found success, when you're like, you can only type in 180 characters. Well, apparently even that's been too much, because it seems like people are going to get their news from memes these days. And if you don't know what a meme is, it is just an image with like 2 lines of text on it. And that's where you get your information. So what do you think? Do you see shrinking attention spans really being a hindrance to even having conversation in any meaningful sense of the word?
I spent days on making long posts, and it was probably a mistake. I should have just, bunched them up in little groups. But yeah, they'll see, just a like and, no comments if it's, a bunch of questions or something, no one cares to, write up anything or, really have a detailed conversation. Memes, are probably the worst source of information you can come to. I mean, it's fine to share a meme, they're pretty funny, that's why I share them. Some of them are funny, but if it's not accompanied by anything, a source or anything meaningful, it's just useless kind of way.
Yeah, so that, we're talking about memes now. I know we had a little back and forth on that, and even in your feed. Is there a positive use of the image with a line of text as a means of communication with someone?
There's probably a small use for it. I'd say even with it depends on the picture and what it was, for, if you want to use every inch of, the picture that you want, for more flavor and context.
I say that because, at least, 10 to 1 from my perspective, they are another one of these conversation killers. You posted one the other day about had a whale jumping out of the water that I guess had something about, I want to turn into a bird in turn, relating to evolution or something. I'm just like, what is, it's so absurd. It ends any possible chance.
Oh, yes. That one in particular was a jab at one of my buddies. He's here today. But, it was a jab at him, because it was obviously false. A whale can't turn into a bird, overnight.
But, going in a different direction, I saw a comment the other day. Well, it was a long comment string, and again, this is a dangerous subject for a mixed crowd, but the original post was about something that President Trump had done, and someone, started a comment but I kid you not, at least 3 pages of nothing but memes, two back and forth to each other, and they were all really pointless and just like digging the knife. And so, I think, I don't know if the world might be better off if memes were abolished.
I think they probably would be better off without them. But,
But if nothing else, I mean, this kind of circles back to the idea that it seems like, I don't know if, obviously, in our technologically advanced culture, the idea is, that we have all these great things to sort of make our day-to-day life easier and more productive. But, as I've said before, it seems like today we have less time than ever. And I don't know if that contributes to shrinking attention spans. Like, I only have so much time to think about some deep subject, but obviously it seems to be a problem.
I don't know. Me and you find the time to, chat back and forth all the time. So, I mean, making time to do things that you want to do, if you want to have a meaningful dialogue, making the time, that's step one.
So maybe that's even the part of it right there is really the desire to want to understand viewpoints outside of where our own beliefs lie.
Yeah. We're used to living in our little bubbles and, not touching or rubbing bubbles from other people, I think we need to pop those bubbles and, maybe share a big bubble.
Yeah. Excellent. We're about halfway through the event, so if you do have cards, if you would just pass them to the middle aisle. We've got a couple of guys that are going to come and gather the cards up, and we'll take 15 minutes or so at the end to kind of go back and forth on these. But questions for atheists, questions for Christians, whatever you would like to know. So, all right. Well, while they're doing that, one of the things, I guess, we can talk about how to have positive dialogue. In other words, you think about, okay, this is the attitude I need to approach dialogue with. These are the type of verbal faux pas I need to avoid and all that sort of thing. I guess we've sort of kind of gone over what negative dialogue looks like and what to do to kind of move towards a more positive dialogue. But that really is comes into practice when we actually do it.
Yes.
So you put a poll out a while back of things I call hot button issues in today's culture, and and I've talked to people and like, well, what would you like to see? So we've got a short list of subjects here. And so, I don't know, you want to call this the rapid fire round or whatever, but we will engage on these issues and just show, like, look, if you typically see people talk about this in social media or anywhere today, it generally involves a screaming match. And so, hopefully we can get through this without screaming at each other. So, all right, so topic number 1, separation of church and state. Obviously, we're talking about the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, this really comes into play when you think about things like the Ten Commandments Monument or prayer in schools and that sort of thing. So I guess really where I would probably begin to even tackle this, and I want to hear your point on this, is really, when you consider a document like the Constitution and that statement, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof. My initial instinct is to say, okay, what did this mean to the people who wrote it originally?
Yes.
And so when I consider what they came out of, the theocracy that really, you had this blending of church and state where the king, was the enforcer of the religion in the region. You pay taxes to the state, and part of that went to the church because it was a state church. And, every other religious viewpoint was prohibited by military force or, legal action or what have you, spend the night in the stockade. So if that was the environment they were fleeing from, when I read that, that tells me what their driving mentality was in putting that down. So would you take that same approach?
I would. You got to get context whenever you're talking about things like this. Would they make the same mistake when founding another country to get involved with the same thing? I don't think they wanted to, abolish religion, but they definitely wanted to build something where you can have your religion if you want it, but don't, cross that line like they did, obviously, where they came from.
Right.
Yeah.
So how would you, for example, to me, what that means is there's a certain nuance to that. Like, okay, I realize this means that we're not going to have a theocracy, and which even from my point of view, from Scripture as a Christian, I would say theocracy is bad. But what I see is that doesn't necessarily mean that any semblance of religion should be excluded from public life. In terms of, let's just give an example. Last year in June, Kentucky passed a bill that was allow their public schools to have a Bible literacy course as part of a social studies curriculum. What are your thoughts on that?
Unless it's a Christian school, I wouldn't agree to that. If it's student led and it's after school, that's one thing, but inside school, they're supposed to learn about what they're supposed to learn about, the basics of life.
What would it change your opinion if it wasn't just a Bible, if it was world religions? This would be a study of Christianity, study of Islam, study of Buddhism. If it was more wide-ranging, would that change your opinion?
If it was structured in a way to where one would not have preference over the other, I may change my mind on it, because I'm not for me and my daughter, some of you probably saw her running around here, 50 miles an hour, but, I'm going to teach her, I'm going to show her, all the religions, that I can, and all the different sects of Christianity, and then she can make her own decision.
Okay.
That's the way I think that if we're going to have a class, like a world religions class, then it should be bringing all of it in there, all the historic religions and all the things like that.
Would you allow for public opinion to shape any of that? In other words, let's kind of go on to the other one. This is really a controversial topic, even within some circles of Christianity. I know the Ten Commandments monument, and a certain senator, I'm afraid to mention in mixed company sometimes, but Senator Rapert quite often uses his social media platform in ways I know that atheists disagree with, but as the driving force behind putting up this Ten Commandments monument. Two points on that. Should he be able to use his government media account to post a verse of Scripture? In other words, exercise his religion using a public means of communication.
No.
Let's start there.
I don't really care if he does or not, as much as I prefer not, just because. But it's a public forum. Facebook is to the public. It's not necessarily funded by the government. They have no control over it. It doesn't really bother me that much if he does.
All right. So what about the Ten Commandments monument? Now, let me just. And I know we would probably disagree on this, but I would say it would almost depend on where you go on this. Now, I always looked at this monument sort of like, when you go to the Supreme Court and you look on the doors on the outside, well, you see the Ten Commandments there. if you take the approach to where a lot of the laws that we have in our society that really we both agree with, if we look to that as the foundation for how a lot of our laws were formed in early America, would it have a place in terms of cultural historicity, that sort of thing?
I don't think it still should be there. It may be just because it's 10 Commandments. It depends. If they would let, I don't know if it's a satanic temple, and they sometimes have actual nice monuments, or the atheist monuments, which are really they're just benches, but that's something.
So you would be equally against, say, the Baphomet statue?
Yeah, I mean, as if they would allow it, then I don't have an issue with it. But if it's specifically for Christianity, don't let another religious statue come in of a different religion. All
right. This is supposed to be a rapid fire round, and I'm going long here.
Yeah.
So let's jump to the next one, and because I know this one's close to your heart, gun control. Because it's really, and this almost for me is a mirror of my opinion of separation of church and state. Because when you think about what the Constitution says, what they meant in the Second Amendment when they said, and I had to jot it down because I wouldn't remember it off the top of my head, but a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In my mind, the driving force for them to write that, and their intention behind it was what they came out of, which was a state church enforced by the military and the law. And so to prevent that sort of a thing from happening here in this country, it behooves to have a people that are armed that could fight back against an oppressive government if needed. And so I know you're not anti-gun, but obviously, the reason that this is even a topic is the shootings.
Yep.
The school shootings, the church shootings, the shooting in Las Vegas. So what is gun control mean for you?
Gun control to me means not better access, but better teaching of guns. An 18-year-old should not be able to go into a Walmart and just buy a gun same day with no training. Especially being an 18-year-old, when I was 18, and having a gun, I was like, well, I'm not ready to shoot this huge gun, but, I did it anyway. But, 18-year-olds are not mature enough, or, especially if they're mentally ill, we don't know. I mean, we have licenses for cars, registrations for cars, and I'm a gun owner, I think we need, registrations for guns, more registration, and, we should be able to require some type of, schooling, not, necessarily on school property, but, some type of training, besides the joke kind of training we have for concealed weapons permits, it's not just the gun problem. It's, the mentality that guns, don't kill people, because they kind of do kill people if they're in the right hands.
Sure. Well, I don't think either one of us would disagree, that bad guys do bad things. Yeah. And, I'm assuming that both of us would probably be in the same place, in that I don't think it's right for anybody to be able to go down to the gun store and buy a bazooka or a minigun.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, I think, given what I see in places that have done this, a complete ban on guns would be just as detrimental to a society that has them in their midst. And so, obviously, somewhere in between is always, it seems to be the better path to take, is the middle road.
Yeah. Australia, which is, one example, and they're just, they're one continent, cut off from the rest of the world. It worked well there, banning guns. But, you can't really do that here in America as well as you, should be able to if you could,
Right.
But, Guns are made to do one thing, and that's to kill. And it's fine if you want to kill, an animal to eat, but having that much power, in your hands, pointed at someone else, no one should have that without some type of mindset, the right mindset.
Okay. All right. Rapid fire. Moving on to the next one. Now this one, oddly, it ranked high in your poll, but I had to go look it up to actually, death with dignity.
Oh.
So, we're talking about
the right to die.
Right, yeah, to choose to have, basically, I'm going to call it physician-assisted suicide. How about that? Now, obviously, they frame it a different way, and when I looked it up, apparently, the idea behind a lot of these groups that are proponents of it is really mimicking a law that they passed in Oregon, which basically allows this to happen, for physicians to prescribe medicine for whoever wants to. And I don't know, I should have looked harder to see, if there were any restrictions around it. Do you have to have a terminal illness or, There's a lot of nuance there that I would question, but, it basically opened the door for a physician, I guess, under some circumstance to give life-ending medication, which doesn't exist in any other state.
Yeah, and it goes against the, their oath that they take, when they become doctors.
Right. Now I would say, just really from a Christian standpoint, I have reasons why I would be opposed to that. Obviously, this really comes down for me to the issue of what it means to be human and do we value humanity. But it seems like the biggest conflict in that issue is not going to come really from any sort of religious point. It's going to be from the medical establishment in terms of the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. So really that's, that would be the biggest challenge.
It seems like it because, if you have a terminal illness, I don't know anyone personally that does anymore. But it's sad to see them go through a lot of that stuff, and if they should have at least the opportunity if they know they're going to be, dead. And it's going to be painful. It's different if an 18-year-old, says, hey, I want, some pills to, go kill myself. No, I think you should, let's do a little research first and find out why you're feeling that way. Right. Especially if you're not terminally ill.
I was talking to a friend about this today, and he really brought up a good point. And I guess it sort of in a way ties back to the Christian viewpoint on this and the fact, that for us, it doesn't have to be physician assisted. Any suicide really is to us is a violation of the value of humanity, right? But for me, when you think about, okay, this is really obviously not everybody's going to have the Christian viewpoint, and so when I started saying, look, this is about choice for people, and this is the choice that should or shouldn't they be allowed to make this choice for themselves. He made a good point in that, you think about other laws. We are restricted on how fast we can drive down the road. And we are restricted by laws in a lot of areas in our life that's based on, what we hold to be the best for all the people around us, right? So with this, do you see any parallel there in terms of...
It could be from the other side. Like, say, it would be worse for the family, probably, maybe, but that's an opinion. Right. So it could be different for every family.
Okay, last one real quick. And like you said, you mentioned this early on. When it comes to abortion, I don't know that this is a religious or a political or anything, because, you find people that hold all kinds of view all over the place when it comes to the issue of abortion. Now, obviously, in my worldview, from a Christian standpoint, again, this is the question: what it means to be human. But really, when I engage people on the issue of abortion, it's not even really from a religious standpoint. It's really about, okay, tell me, when is a person, right?
Yeah. And that's still the hardest thing to figure out. I mean, technically they are alive, in a sense, because, it's organic material, it's alive. But when does it actually become a conscious thing?
And I don't know that I've ever seen anyone answer that question.
I don't know if you can yet. I mean, if you do, it's just really an opinion either way. So that's why the law is kind of vague, I think.
So, there's a Christian apologist, which I know most atheists hate with a passion, and he gives an illustration about this that I think really applies well in this. If you had a building that was set up with explosive to demolish, and I go up and I just hit the plunger and blow the building up, and I didn't go through to see, okay, was there anybody in this building before I destroyed it? And then it turned out there was somebody in there that got killed. Well, I'm at fault, In other words, because we can't answer the question of when does this become a sentient life? When is this a human life worth protecting? Wouldn't it by nature just disqualify abortion entirely?
I don't think so just yet. You have a big problem with rights, the women's rights. Where does the fetus's or baby's rights begin? Where does hers, the woman's, where do they begin? Whose life is more important if you have to choose? It's probably going to be the woman, most likely. The analogy, if you go into a building and it's on fire, are you going to save a little toddler, or are you going to save a petri dish full of embryos? You're probably going to save the toddler, that's just one analogy I've heard.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a tough one. And I guess from my point, I would say, well, in one instance, you have the potential for life, and the other one, you actually have life. And so, obviously, there's going to be some distinguishing things that need to be made there. But all right, we are really short on time, and that ran long, so we're going to jump right into the Q&A portion for this. And all right, so first one is aimed at you, and I'll see if we can just kind of go back and forth here a little bit. Can you explain an atheist's moral compass, a sense of rightness and compassion inherent to humans, not guided by spirituality? I'm assuming this is like...
where do we get our morality from?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have to be told not to rape anyone. I don't need the Bible to tell me that. Even if I haven't read the entire Bible, it really doesn't say not to do it. It doesn't say not to do a lot of things, but we still know not to do it. Let's say, if you want to use a religious text, as in the Quran, where it says a lot of bad things, a lot of cutting heads off and stuff like that, is that if you base off one religious text, you have to base it off another two. It's just, there's that way to go to answer the question, and there's a longer one that will take an hour or so to explain this.
This next one is exactly the same thing. It's aimed at me, which is odd. As a Christian, God's word determines right and wrong. How do you determine right and wrong? And that says it's for me. When you talk about, and I think, this is really, at least from the Christian perspective, what it comes back to, if you are a Christian and you think atheists are immoral, stop. It's not that atheists are immoral people. That is absolutely wrong. But for me, when we talk about the issue of morality, what is right, what is wrong, it's more about not whether you and I can see what's right and wrong. How do we justify that? And to answer this question to me, I mean, my justification really goes back to my absolute authority, which is God's Word. I mean, I determine right and wrong based on what I believe is the absolute truth in the world, which is what God had said. And so when you consider that, it's not the matter of you and I both understand what's right and wrong is. How do you justify it in your world? I've heard it. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or anything like that. I've heard. You'll have to help me, because I think it was maybe Dan Barker that sort of holds this idea of do no wrong, or cause the least amount of harm, that sort of thing. That it's, in other words, it's not a fixed line. Would you say that morality is absolute or relative?
I would say it's changing with time.
Okay.
If you let's take the Bible, for example. The Old Testament is very, very different than the New Testament. We can see that the laws change. Is it because society changes with time? Our laws change with time. For the justification question, I'm not really sure how to answer that all the way, but I'll think on it. You can come up.
All right, well, let's skim through, because we're running out of time here. And if we don't get to your question, Al and I will both be available after this, and you come and you talk to us, and we're all going to be here for a while. So
if I don't answer it right, just come to me and I'll try to do it again.
All right, let's see here. I don't know if this is for me. In your experience, do most Christians have any desire to communicate outside their faith? I guess that's the same thing. So, that is an excellent question, and you can ask anyone in my Sunday school class. When it comes to this issue, Alan and I are both lockstep. If I tell people all the time, if you're a Christian, why? Is it because grandma was, or grandpa was, or your mom and dad was? Well, that's not enough of a reason. I want people to examine their beliefs critically. I want them to truly understand what it is they believe and why they believe it. Because one of the things that we do, if you ask me, I do believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. In other words, if I believe Christianity is truth, I therefore believe Islam is wrong. Mormonism is wrong. Atheism is wrong. And if I'm going to say that I am right and you are wrong, I cannot very well do that unless I actually understand what it is that these other groups believe. Because if you have a truth, then you might have to have something outside of that. And so, that's why I challenge all people that I know. Look, probably the worst thing in the world to me is millennial type folks today who say, well, what's right for you is right and what's right for me is right, and there is no ultimate right. It's just about what you believe. No, the world can't work that way. If I thought 2 + 2 was 112, you wouldn't want me to be your banker, right? Maybe you would, I don't know, but I believe there is truth, and I believe we can come to it, and I encourage people dig, examine yourself, and I know you do the same.
Right?
Sure. All right, so a few for you. This is kind of strange. Where do you believe the concept of love originates? It's kind of interesting.
Just like any other concept of feeling or emotion, it's a chemical. It doesn't make it any less real, but it's the same thing as laughter or anything else. It's just a chemical reaction.
And this one's for both of us. And what is the most effective way do you believe non-religious and religious people can come together to help the community?
I think by starting with events like this would be one thing. Another one would be just to help each other out. We ask for religious help, religious communities help all the time sometimes. And, Doris, she volunteers all the time for religious organizations. Mm-hmm. She's one of our volunteers.
I'm totally agree. You know, I think that's why both of us thought this was going to be a positive thing to, you know, begin the process to see these groups come together. And I mean, you know, helping people, that's a part of humanity, you know. Where that desire comes from, obviously you and I would see that differently, but, you know, what kind of a world would it be if we didn't see our fellow man as valuable and worthy of our love and compassion? So, All right. All right, one more, and then we'll do a concluding remark for both of us. Do you think labels hurt or help conversations? For example, atheist, pro-life, Republican. So do labels hurt or help conversations? Now, I would say it helps if you're willing to ask, well, what do you mean beyond that? You know, I mean, if somebody tells me, for example, I'm a biblical creationist. Okay, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Because there's a lot of different views on that subject alone. So, you know, this is something we touched on earlier. I think the worst thing to do is probably when you hear something, you've already framed out what it means for this person to claim to be this. Right? I mean, what would you be?
Labels can do both. They can help you identify the person a little better, but you don't want to get complacent in labeling, because that you may label that person and they may be totally different. You know, you don't want to go on from labeling to stereotyping because there's a bridge there. You don't want to make that bridge.
Right. All right. So you want to do just like a short concluding remark for each of us, and then we can move on to the second half of the evening.
Well, the only thing I have, if you like this, let me know. I got plenty of speakers. Just let me know if you like it. You can Facebook me or come talk to me, right after this. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate you coming and appreciate you doing this. And I thank everybody that comes. So, I might be a little bit longer than that in my remarks, but just very quickly, in concluding this, obviously, Alan and I, our desire is to see better communication. And, one of the things about living in the country we live in is the freedoms that we have. And I happen to think that the freedom that we have to hold varying beliefs and different viewpoints and backgrounds, that's what makes us one of the best countries in the world to live in. But the problem that usually comes with that is that in order to have those kind of freedoms, now we have to learn how to live with people that have different views and different beliefs. And it's so easy, to attack the other side and tear down what somebody else believes. And so, if we're going to live in community and have meaningful communication with our friends and our neighbors and our coworkers, it has to start with positive, civil dialogue. Alan and I, we come from very different backgrounds. I mean, we are basically at opposite ends on our worldview in many, many ways. And I know, like I said, I've seen Alan in his conversations when he engages with people and certain things come up. Well, it turns hostile very quickly. And so unless we learn to recognize what those are and get past that, what I see in our culture is not people moving into togetherness, but it is creating camps and dividing and getting, basically fencing ourselves off from people that don't think the same way as we do. And so I would just like to say, to the Christians in the audience, I knew there, I saw the trepidation at having an event like this, and the idea that atheists were going to come into the church, and I know there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of confusion in many Christians, and but if we are going to do the very thing that Christ said, what were the two biggest commands Christ said? love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. If we are actually going to do that, we have got to be willing to reach out, because you remember, as soon as Christ gave that command to love your neighbor, he had someone say, well, who's my neighbor? And his answer to that was to give a parable about the Good Samaritan who, the priest passed by this injured man and the rabbi passed, but it was the Samaritan who stopped and helped him. And Jesus said, well, that's your neighbor. And that is impactful if you understand what he was saying, because who were the Samaritans to the Pharisees? They were people that they wanted to keep at arm's length. They did not want anything to do with them. And so by Jesus saying, here's the person you should love just like you love yourself, well, what does that tell us? I know I have witnessed Christians get frustrated and lash out, but if we are going to show the love of Christ to everyone, that means being respectful and gracious and loving to everyone regardless of their beliefs. And to the atheists that are here, I know many of you, if not all, I don't think I know an atheist that doesn't come from a religious background. And I know a lot of you have experienced pain and mockery and ridicule. Here's something I don't think many Christians know. One of the biggest things I see Alan and many of you do is reach out to those that are leaving the faith and embracing atheism, because what that means, for you, that generally means to say I'm an atheist means I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to be held at arm's length by friends, by family, by coworkers, and to the Christians, for many times I see that is self-professing Christians that are doing that. And so to the Christians, if you have done that, stop it. You are, if you believe that we have a revelation from God that says that we should treat people with love and respect and dignity, that means doing that. It means treating everyone regardless of what they believe with that same attitude. And so to you atheists, if you've experienced that, I am sorry. We recognize our own shortcomings within our church and the people that come into it. And so, I would just say to you, if we come to you and we desire to share the gospel, if we want to tell you about Christ, it's not that we are trying to put people in the seats. It's not we're trying to get money in the coffer. It is because we believe it to be the truth, and we want you to know that truth. We want you to know who your Creator is. But if you don't believe that, if that is something you reject, if that's just a bunch of hooey to you, you know what? I still want to be your friend. I still want to make relationships with you. I still want to establish this bridge and have communication so I can understand you better. And because, honestly, if we are going to live in this world, if we are going to be neighbors, be co-workers, we have got to learn how to respect each other regardless of what we believe. So, thank you all for coming tonight. Any closing thoughts from you?
I got nothing.
Got nothing? Okay.
Nope.
All right, here we go. Again, thank everyone for coming, Christians and atheists. I really appreciate it, and I think again this event is just so meaningful in the world. When you leave, if we are got a pile of barbecue, if you are a barbecue lover, but we also have some fruits and vegetable things if you don't like barbecue. So there should be something for everyone. And when you get ready to leave, if you will come, and for those who want to, you can go right out this door right here to your right and down the stairs to your left. And our fellowship hall's down there. I think, has somebody gone out to get that? Yeah, so it's ready to be served. And so go out and help yourself. And again, thank you so much for coming. Alan and I will be here to talk to anybody that wants to. But let me just say this, very quickly. Alan and I, we've had our dialogue. This is a dialogue that has happened for hours and hours and hours already. Don't let the conversation end here. If you go out here, find someone that doesn't see the world in the same way you do. Reach out to them. Put these things into practice, and let's seek to truly understand each other, all right? And don't let the conversation end here. So, again, thank you for coming, and help yourself to the barbecue.